Welcome to our 74th podcast. Today we'll be talking about when to bring in external change consultants. What's one thing you can do now to add value to your organization by planning with a consultant? Keep listening to find out. Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants Rich Cruz, Ben Kleinman, and Cheryl Volpe to explore, challenge, and build on various organizational culture and change management concepts. It's a blend of theory and practice based on their personal and professional experiences working with companies of all sizes across various industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want new ideas about the corporate environment, or just want to listen to a group of consultants talking about how to make work more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces. Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. Welcome back to our podcast. If you're looking for the Harmonious Workplaces podcast, well, you found it. It's right here. And I'm Rich Cruz, an organizational development consultant, and joined by my co-host and co-author and co-founder, Cheryl Volpe. Hi, Cheryl. How are you?
Great, thanks. Hi, everyone.
So, Cheryl, we're going to be talking about when to bring in somebody like us, right? Like a change consultant.
Someone just like us.
Just like us. And we're not saying bring us in, although we are saying bring us in, but still.
Doesn't have to be us. We've got lots of talented colleagues.
That's right. Absolutely. Yes. So, it's really important for an organization to consider that it needs to have some, outside resources, right? And like you put in, I'm going to steal your thunder for 1 second here, but in the show notes here,
I
you
made
put
it. I
like
made it for you.
well, well, you said like we could make this an advertising campaign for ourselves, but I mean, like you said, it's not our style. It's not the way that we do things around here. Because frankly, I mean, we've had other consultants on this, arguably, people who kind of compete with us in some respects. Right? We've had Dan Pinkham on. We've had Alexis Alex Brassis, right?
Rob Snyder.
Alex Brassis. Yep. Robert Snyder. Yeah. So, but they all bring something different to the table.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Katie Thomas too with the people assessments.
That's
help
right.
They help companies assess their people and all sorts of different parameters on the operation to see if they're ready for different things, including change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And change management consulting, I think you and I and Ben talked about this recently, where search terms around organizational change management, all those types of things, right? They've grown in the last year and a half by like 900% according to Google. So there's certainly a need for this to happen, particularly in the volatile time that we're in right now. And this change management as a discipline, right, as a specific type of consulting, it's been around, but it seems to be set to grow. Yeah,
we will talk about some of the stats that are out there, and as a discipline it is definitely growing in recognition.
I know you've been talking to some people over at ProSci in the last year, right? So ProSci being a change management, more of an association that offers training and a certification, and
In
they
AdCom
add
specifically,
right?
right, and they're growing.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, right?
Globally.
Right. So what would be some of the reasons why somebody would bring in somebody externally?
according to Hermie and Hermione in our comic, just about anything that makes them uncomfortable, right?
That's
They
right.
want someone else to do it.
That's true. That
But in the three-dimensional world, it can be a variety of things, right?
mhm,
It can be an initiative that is so vast that it will require specific strategy, frameworks, and planning.
right.
Could be a merger, and it could be M&A, it could be an acquisition, it can be outsourcing, uh,
Mhm.
anything that outpaces the internal capabilities or expertise.
Sure. That makes sense. And it's usually when these like this so like in an M&A type of situation, or there's an investment in something, right? The stakes are high, but the internal capacity may be low or non-existent, right? Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say. And other qualities of change management as a discipline are training,
Oh yeah.
documentation, and change initiatives that fail are often because of poor planning, not enough training, not enough attention on the variety of communication and the amount of communication that it takes for change to take hold.
Sure.
Everybody
Sure.
knows change is hard because we are
Yeah.
resistant to things that we are not familiar with. However, the flip side, of course, is that it doesn't have to be that way. There are tools, there are approaches, and there are strategies, especially if a company is looking at growth and change to keep up with innovation, to stay modern, and to stay
Sure.
efficient.
Sure. Well, I'm reading this book. So through Sherm, I'm going through kind of a little bit of a mentorship thing, right?
Firm.
And yeah, we have an acronym. The Society of Human Resources Management.
We have a history with that
Thanks.
acronym. Yeah.
Yeah, we do. We sure do. Um, but there was a book that was recommended to me called The Activator Advantage, and it was really interesting. It's about um, it's actually more about sales than anything, right? But one of the things that it talked about was like why a company would hire a firm or a person, or whatever resource they need, right? To especially when it comes to change, um, they're trying to mitigate risk, they're trying to grow, or they're trying to save costs, which is kind of mitigating risk, right? But I mean, revenue, um, yeah, generating revenue, saving costs, so increasing profit, and then mitigating the risk of whether that's legal or environmental or any of those other things, right? So those high stakes things, and yeah, oftentimes the internal staff that are just doing the day to day, right? They don't necessarily see everything that's going on, if that makes sense.
Yes. And that leads into employee engagement and morale, team building. If people feel disconnected to what's happening, or if they feel like they are just, stuck in their, you know, status quo of the day to day, and they can lose their engagement, they can already be set against any kind of change if that becomes
Sure,
uncomfortable in itself, and
that's
then
right.
a company can lose its competitiveness at that point too,
That
right?
makes a lot of sense. Right, right. Who likes to have their natural rhythm and flow, you know, uh, go away because of some disruption, or because they don't they're not they can't even fully engage, right? Because they're like, this is completely outside of my comfort zone, and I don't really want to deal with this. Um,
The flip side of that, of course, and we've talked about this in the past too, is when you have a culture where change is constant in a way that makes you feel engaged in a learning kind of culture, kind of.
Sure.
environment,
Sure.
right? So it depends on the culture. It depends on the personality of the person. It depends on their purpose, why they are there. If they become disenchanted with, oh no, another change, or I'm so glad that we are staying innovative, competitive. I'm curious about how I can add to that.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the idea of a learning culture there, because it's one of the things, one of my other mentors, Alan Landers, right?
Mm.
One of the things that he has talked about in the course that he teaches in organizational development and change leadership consulting is the job of the consultant is like knowledge transfer, right? It's there is a training, a a transfer of skills, knowledge, data, right? That happens that you simply, I mean, you could actually have so that one of the things I do want to mention is that from the Institute of Management Consultants, you can have an internal consultant, somebody who rises up as a subject matter expert or whatever from inside the organization, and then you have external consultants, right? Um, but from that external standpoint, bringing in a new perspective and bringing in the learning that comes from that, I think is something that organizations realize that they sometimes have to do, but sometimes they're reticent to do it because they don't see what that return of on investment is going to be, if that makes sense.
I'm so glad you brought it up, and we are hitting all of our major points just right up front, right? Because that is another kind of change that we didn't list in the beginning, and it is that knowledge transfer. And
Mm,
when there is a habit or tradition or years and years of processes that have just been done a certain way, so a company may be unable to see what's important about that process because they don't have that outside perspective that
sure,
a change manager can bring in from the outside to ask the right questions because the process may be unfamiliar to them or new to them. So they ask the right questions to document that process so that someone just walking in can also learn it.
right
And it
on.
could be an internal consultant that can still bring that curiosity to, let's say they were promoted into a consulting role and they had to document a process that they were already familiar with.
Sure.
There
And
might,
there's,
yeah,
yeah, so they have that fresh perspective that, the people who may be somewhat snowblind to the everyday, um,
right.
they
Even
can come in and see that.
an internal consultant can have the mindset to ask the right questions too.
That makes
It's
sense.
not
Yeah,
as if it's not as if they couldn't. And there can be advantages to that because they are familiar with it already, maybe. Or they're because their purpose has changed because they've been promoted to a different role. Maybe that brings the freshness.
sure. Makes sense. Let's do this, Cheryl. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, you have some stats here that I think would be cool to go through. What do you think?
Sounds great to me. And I did fact check them. So, yeah.
Right on. Perfect. All right, we'll be right back. Dysfunctional organizational cultures and poorly managed transformations can devastate employee morale and motivation, leading to disengaged employees, poor work quality, and the loss of your best people. The impacts to your organization include high costs, low productivity, and wasted resources. At Harmonious Workplaces, our purpose is to help you build the best workplace possible. We are advisors applying proven organizational development and industrial organizational psychology methodologies to help you become your best organization. We are doers, using time-tested principles to help you execute organizational change initiatives smoothly and successfully. To discover how Harmonious Workplaces can impact your organization, visit www.harmoniousworkplaces.com and book a free 30-minute information session with one of our consultants today. Again, that's www.harmoniousworkplaces.com. And we're back. So, Cheryl, we've been talking about when to bring a consultant, an external consultant in to facilitate change, right? And you brought some statistics here. And what we know from statistics is 42.1% of them are made up.
So we
We
have
said that this is a, if anybody doesn't know, right, that's from like episode 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 of our podcast
early.
early on. Yeah,
We've made that stat up. If there was
we
any
did.
question,
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And you know, we should make a cup or something like that, or a, a mug, or put that on a
a
T-shirt.
T-shirt would just have 42.1%. Yeah,
That's right.
there
Yeah,
you go.
yeah.
Bling.
But we don't have made up stats here. We have stuff that you pulled from some different places, and some of them are really, you know,
Provocative.
jarring, and really bring to light, some of the story here.
Yeah, start with the big one. You can do it. I made it purple.
The big one, 264%. Are you kidding me? So what is that? 200 companies that manage change effectively, often with consultant support, see up to 264% in revenue growth over those with poor change management.
This came from a report from a company called WTW, and they have been working with Microsoft, according to the data I found, to manage some of their larger change initiatives. And there are a lot of there's a lot of executives from Microsoft that are speaking to the advantages that they got through WTW, and their change managers were very effective in helping them again stay competitive, initiate change on a large scale, enterprise wide, and that stat is part of a report that is the accumulation of data over the last 10 years. And
Hmm.
we have all been a part of change initiatives that were managed poorly.
Sure,
They can die on the
sure.
vine. You and I were just talking the other day about how much money was spent on different processes that just weren't trained, weren't reinforced. That's another huge part of ADKAR. The R at the end is that reinforcement.
The reinforced part, yeah,
And
yeah.
that money is lost. There can be a level of disenchantment or a
Hmm.
lack of credibility on the part of management, leadership. There are so many negative parts that can affect a company's growth when they fail or are managed poorly.
Sure, sure. But it does make sense that on the converse side, right, that when it is, so this, 2.6 times growth factor that could happen here. Um, I think like you have in the notes here, like, delivering a consistent vision with a clear sense of direction. I mean, we've talked about vision, and that is in a lot of different change models, right? Cotter's change model, um, the leadership challenge, all of these really have a focus on that. If you don't have that clarity, it's really hard to move things forward. But an external person, this is why coaching is effective, right? Is that they oftentimes coaches concentrate on that when they do leadership coaching. So
Right.
yeah, I'm not too surprised. I mean, I've actually seen, I don't know if I've seen 264% growth, but I certainly have seen 100% or better, after a successful change initiative.
Yeah. And going back to your touching on the coaching, and also earlier when you said that some employees can feel disengaged from the change because they would rather just stay in their familiar routine, or they may not feel like they are a part of the change and therefore do not engage to make it successful. This is another advantage that change management consultants can bring in, they give employees a chance to give feedback, answer questions, to participate through certain frameworks, have a devotion to the employee feedback process. And
Hmm.
that can increase engagement and adoption.
Sure. Sure. Absolutely.
It's
Um,
not exactly coaching, but it does create forums for an exchange where questions can be answered and growth can happen, engagement.
sure. What are the like whenever I've brought in you've brought in some external consultants in your career, have you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, I have too, and it's interesting that what they oftentimes bring with them, in addition to the fresh perspective and all that, right, is that they will have some kind of a framework that they bring in that is much more effective than what the day to day of the organization has, if that makes sense, right?
It does.
Yeah,
Yeah. And it also, it's not just that, let's just like throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. We have to do something here, right? It's
right.
a structure and a framework. And especially if a company is the kind that has seasonal work, consultants will come and go for different reasons during different cycles.
Sure.
And that helps keep a company lean when it's not having to be in that cycle.
Hmm.
So just, you know, most of my experience has been bringing in consultants for specific purpose that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And everybody understands that this is a specified period of time. These are the goals. When it's done and accomplished, its contract is over.
Yep.
So yes, I've a
Yep.
lot of experience with that.
However, one of those going back to the reinforced part of AdCar, right?
Mm.
I think that's one of the things that um, sets a good consultant from a great consultant
Mm.
is their ability to come and check back in and find out how things are going later on, because sometimes in the project, like you said, beginning, middle, end, that end part, we're done. We don't check in again. We don't do anything else. But if it's baked into the process of regular check-ins and seeing how things are and looking over the data and reinforcing the behavior, I think that's probably where you have in here that you know, external consultants report a much higher excuse me much higher success rate uh, of integration into the ongoing programs, right? So, or, the ongoing operation of of the organization. Um, I think that reinforcement part, which aligns very much to like Kirkpatrick's um, training evaluation model, right? Of the behavior part, right? That reinforcement part is so critical, but and I think that's where a lot of change probably fails is developing the habits over time. Does that make sense?
That absolutely makes sense. And getting a change off the ground and integrated is not the entire job, right?
That's right.
Right.
That's right. That's only, if we look at that, like our model, shameless plug, assess, amend, align, right? The assessment and the amendment part are super fantastic. That's what you need to integrate everything in, understand where you're at, understand, or actually do the integration part. But then that alignment part, that reinforcement part, the part that continues the flywheel of change going
Hmm.
is it's a critical step that often doesn't happen, and we talk about this a lot in other consulting circles, right? That oh, my this project is done, And then 2 years later, oh, they hired somebody else to go and do this again, right? You don't want to be in that kind of situation.
You don't want to be in that situation. That's right. And, we haven't even, AI hasn't come up in the conversation yet, but here it is.
Oh boy.
And just, you know, the idea that that is a change that everyone is bringing in now is a huge opportunity for a company to bring in an external consultant to optimize the use of that tool, standardize the use of that tool,
Sure.
keep the regulations and the confidentiality and all the guidelines that are just so amorphic right now and coalescing around certain principles. But those are still very much taking shape right now. And another huge role of change consultants currently is to help companies integrate AI ethically, efficiently, and uh, functionally.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's do this, Cheryl. Let's take you opened up a can of worms there, and I want to talk a little bit more about that. So, um, let's take a quick break and we'll dive into that.
All right.
All right. We'll be right back.
Meet Hermie the HR Hermit Crab. Laugh, learn, and lead better with Hermie. Hermie is here to tackle workplace madness with heart and humor from Harmonious Workplaces. He's perfect for HR pros, leaders, and change makers. Hermie teaches workplace lessons through cartoons and is great for team discussions and workshops. Get your copy on Amazon now. www.hermiehrhermitcrab.com. Again, that's hermiehrhermitcrab.com.
And we're back. And Cheryl, before we went on this little break, you opened up a can of worms about mentioning artificial intelligence.
I did, and it's nowhere in the show notes. So you're going to have to make it up from here.
We're, that's okay. We're going to punt here, but I mean, look, we we use artificial intelligence for the type of work that we do, and I think going back to something you mentioned earlier about capacity, right? Within an organization, right? I mean, there's a significant amount of investment in learning, testing, um, implementation of these tools. Artificial intelligence, one of them, right? But some of the other, even some of the methodologies and expertise that's required for uh, for a specific project, right? I think that's where you'd bring
Right.
in a consultant, right? On
Right.
a temporary or ongoing basis, right? So
And the ethic part of it, like I said, we all know that the guide the guiding principles are still taking shape right now. For
sure,
example, I believe Sam Altman and other key people involved or associated with bringing this into our culture have said, if you didn't already know, everything that you put in there is going to be out there. Delete doesn't work. You know,
right,
you need an expert, potentially a change management consultant, to come into your organization and say, here's what we know, here's what we don't know. You have, do you remember when the intranet was brand new, 1991,
oh
92?
boy,
Right? Like,
yes,
we've got our own internal version of the World Wide Web.
mm-hmm.
Um, that's what this reminds me of. We've got our own internal version of AI now,
Sure,
and that is providing some kind of guide rails on this. But there are lots of things that are still so new that external guidance on how to integrate that into your operation is a safer bet than not having any at all and just saying,
right,
here's your new tool.
yep. And I mean, to that effect, like when you can. find a consultant who has experience using like the internal version of Copilot, right? Which is something that I did with a client not too long ago, right? So we were keeping the institutional knowledge inside the organization. We're not feeding the LLM, the large language model, right? We're
Mhm.
not feeding the machine. We're just using the internal data, keeping those resources in there. Um, and you know, people were not trained about that. They didn't know, the internal people did not know about that, you know, and but because I've had some experience with that, I was able to bring that in. Um, and I know some other consultants through, the Institute of Management Consulting, um, the Society of Evidence-Based Organizational Consulting. These folks who have shared how they have to explain, the risks of using artificial intelligence and how, if you do it this way, you could be compromising your IP, your intellectual property. But if you use it this way within these parameters, then you could keep everything safe, but you may not be able to pull things in. So there's just having some people who have the capacity to have learned those types of things to bring that into the company, um, could really, pay off and have a good, you know some good outcomes and return on that investment.
Would you say, Rich, that that kind of knowledge is becoming its own version of change management?
Well, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
for sure, we all are experiencing a rapid amount of change just because of this technology and its rapid growth, right? So, um, would I say that there are? I mean, I'm sure that there are some consultants that
Just
really focus in on change management, specifically in artificial intelligence. Yes, that's out there. Um, I th- I don't know. In my opinion, it still feels like it's a little, that niche is still a little bit in its infancy, to some extent, because the technology is so new.
yeah, it's still so new. And I think it requires a systems thinking, which is another phrase that's being beat to death right now everywhere. I don't know if you've noticed it, but systems thinking.
Oh, it's
I'm a
all
systems
over
thinker. It's always it's systemically being uh, beat to death. So, but
again.
you almost can't, and I'm just processing this live with you right now, you almost can't be too niche about it because it is a systems kind of thing. You do need to
Sure.
be aware of how it's going to affect every other thing in the
Yep.
company. The
Yep.
tendrils go far and wide, so you can't just say it's not just like, oh, here's MS Office, right?
Right.
Here's
Right.
Excel, have fun. It's not that anymore.
Sure. And that's, if there's anybody who has maybe think about systems, it's Casey DeBryan, right? Our recent
Oh,
guest,
Dr.
our
Casey.
professor, because Dr. Casey would talk about pestle, right? Political, economical, societal, technological, legal, and environmental, um,
Look at you.
issues, right? All those external things,
Mm-hmm.
but that's all part of an open system, right? So it's all system is everything that happens internally, but then there's the external, inputs and outputs.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, as much as it is beaten into us, I think that to some extent, right, a consultant can help to, um, navigate those systems a little better, because they can see some of those external things that you may not be able to see, or those internal things that are, as I think it was Robert Marshak put it, clandestine behaviors, right?
Mm-hmm.
The things that people, are, that the things that are not documented, the things that are just culturally there and are taken for granted. But when an external person comes in and they're like, this is an anomaly. Like, this is not. this is not normal things that I've seen. Why are you doing this type of thing? And question, like you said before, coming in with really great questions. Why are you doing this in this way? Can help to clarify where do we go from here?
Yeah.
How do we make this change happen?
Yeah, that invisible architecture that is in fact the framework of the culture that can
Right.
be undetected by people
Yeah.
who are in it every day.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, Cheryl, we're just about coming to time here. Boy, we could talk a lot about this, but if there's some kind of takeaway that we could leave the audience, what would you say that is?
I love the idea of leaders who understand what change management is
Hmm.
and they invest the time to evaluate their own strengths and weaknesses when they're staring down an initiative coming down the pipeline, right? They have to
Hmm.
make that risk assessment that
Right.
says, can we do this with the staff and the resources and the knowledge that we currently have? And that's where AI comes into it a lot of times.
Yeah, that's true.
Not to go back to that can of worms, but
It's very well, but it's very one of the things that AI is very good at is pattern recognition. So if you can take the data, put it into and AI is not just large language models. There's other artificial intelligence, right? But if you could put it into some of these systems to do the data processing, and then validate that, right, and make sure it's not hallucinating.
right, right.
But
Well,
uh,
it's a whole nother when you think about the writer strike and creativity. What those writers wanted was not to be coming in to fix that initial draft that AI produced in order to cut down the cost of having that writer draft it from scratch.
right,
Right? The writer comes in for half the time and has to fix something that AI generated, right?
sure, sure,
So to your point about using AI to detect patterns in the operation to gain a certain efficiency, very much so. I think a lot of companies are using it for that, obviously. But you still need, even if it's not an ideal situation for a writer, you still need that human element to take that data and those detected patterns and
right,
say, now what do we do next with these shapes to change them into these shapes? And that's where the human element is still coming into that, right? So
yes,
that
right,
that is my takeaway and my wish, that human leaders invest the time to make the best decision for their organization about whether or not to bring in an external resource in
that
human
makes sense.
form.
Yep, and I totally agree with you on that, and I think had that human, if you want to have a human centric organization, right, which I think uh it's not a robot that we're selling stuff to, right? We're selling stuff to people, right? So the customer is always a person, pretty much, right? So yeah, well,
Still
we
got a
could,
pulse.
it's still got a pulse, right? Yes. So but it's so we there still needs to be some human connection, and there needs to be some degree of critical thinking that happens, which
It's great.
I I'd argue you don't necessarily get that. You get uh, some artificial intelligence that simulates that to some extent, right? But we really need to have the empathy and all those things that you don't get out of a machine,
Right.
right?
And what we have to be careful about, there are many things that we have to be careful uh, with. But critical thinking, it can't just be an intervention when things are going sideways, right? Like critical
Hmm.
thinking has to be a part of the entire system, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And I think that that's part of some of the downsides that we're experiencing here is that, oh, AI will do it, and then the critical thinking only comes in when it's like driving the
But
car off the cliff.
yes, right, right. When it's a little too late to do that. But bringing in an external consultant that can help to you mentioned way earlier on, to actually, I think we said this in the announcements for this podcast was, having a consultant come in and help with the planning part of it and the execution and the reinforcement, could be, something that you're just not going to have that. You may not have that capability with your internal staff, right? So bringing in somebody when you're like you said, when you assess the capabilities of your workforce, right? And we have these gaps. How can we plug those gaps in? Well, we can find somebody who can fill those as an external consultant.
Yeah, bridge us from the status quo to our innovative future self.
Right on. Are you our little utopia?
I used to bubble.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining us on this podcast. Tune in for our future podcast, but this is episode 74. So there's so much more information that we have. It's all on harmoniousworkplaces.com. So go check that out. You'll also find us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple, Amazon,
YouTube,
all your favorite streaming platforms there.
YouTube.
YouTube. Oh, yes, absolutely. We're always on YouTube. So. All right, Cheryl, you want to take us out today?
I would love to take us out today. All right, Harmonious Workplaces podcast listeners, thank you. And don't forget, make change a friend.
Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find Harmonious Workplaces on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and other streaming platforms. We'd love any feedback on whatever channel you find us on. Please rate, like, and share our podcast with your network, and remember to add Harmonious Workplaces to your list of favorites to get notified about each new episode. To contact Rich or Cheryl, please visit www.workbalanceconsulting.com. To connect with Ben, find him on LinkedIn or visit at www.harborsidestrategy.com.